Hi, this is Mrs. Davis. We are working on AP Pre-Calculus Lesson 1-5, Polynomial Functions, and we're up to Example 5 on Video 3. Example 5 just has us work out to find all the zeros and factor over the set of complex numbers. So we have two things we have to do. We have to do factors and we have to do zeros. All right, so first let's factor this, and we're gonna see that it has 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so we're gonna try factoring by grouping. That seems to make the most sense. So f of x equals, and then you're kind of going to cut it in half here and pull out your common factor here. So I would have an x squared. And then I would have x minus 3 left over. And what I want is x minus 3 left over. So for the second half, I'm going to pull out a 1, and I get x minus 3. So when it's the same thing, you have to put the 1 there. So to rewrite that, f of x would be x minus 3, the common factor that you had, and then what was left over, x squared plus 1. So we have x squared plus 1. Now, that's not factored over the set of complex numbers because this is not completely factored. In the old days, when you didn't want to have to when they didn't tell you how to factor the set of complex, you would just say, okay, well, that's how you factor it, because this doesn't factor, but it does over the set of complex numbers. So I think it's easier to go ahead and get the 0 and then write it as a factor. So let's go so far. If we're going to do this to find the zeros, we say x minus 3 and x squared plus 1 equals 0. And so that means that x minus 3 equals 0 and x squared plus 1, or x squared plus 1 equals 0. And so here we have x equals 3, and here we have x squared equals negative 1. And so then that would be x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Now, obviously, remember, whenever you take the square root of both sides, you get a plus or minus. So I have a complex number here because that would be I. Remember that the square root of negative 1 is I. So that becomes x equals I. And it's, don't forget, it's plus or minus I. All right, so let's write our zeros in a nice way. Our zeros are plus or minus I and 3. Okay, so there's our zeros. And now to write that factored, we would still say x minus 3, but then our x squared plus 1 became x, and go ahead and pull off your I here, x minus I, and it was plus or minus, so it's x plus I. All right, and so those are my factors. So it says factor over the set of complex numbers, so it asks for both things, so be aware on homework and on quizzes to completely answer the question. All right, let's look at example 6. So it says a complex number, z equals 2i, is a 0 of the polynomial. Find the remaining zeros and factor the complex numbers. Okay, so I don't know really why we have a z. I think it's supposed to be an x. We have x variable here. So we know that since it has one complex number for a factor, it has to have another one. So we have x minus 2i, and we must have x plus 2i because they come in pairs. All right? And now let's try to find the remaining zeros out of here. See if we can't factor that. And so we're going to just pull 2 out, and we get 2x cubed plus 5x squared plus 8x plus 20. And then we have 4 terms, so let's try grouping. So it'd be 2, and then I have x squared. And then that would be, if I take an x squared out, I get a 2x plus 5. And I want a 2x plus 5 over on this side, because I'm doing it by grouping. So if I take out a 4, I get 2x plus 5. All right, so so I have a 2, and then I have 2x plus 5, and then I have x squared plus 4. All right, and so we have 3 zeros. These were my 2 complex, and here's my other one. Now, if you wonder, this should be 2i, right? So let's just double check, because they told us it was. So this would be x squared plus 4 0. So x squared equals -4, and x equals plus or minus the square root of -4. So that's plus or minus 2i. And that factors to x minus 2i and x plus 2i. So it says find the remaining zeros. So that's all it asks. Oh no, it says n factor. All right, so let's get our zeros. That would be plus or minus 2i. And then we didn't do this one. It's 2x plus 5 equals 0. So x is -5 halves. So we have -5 halves. So those are our 3 zeros. And then the factors would be, we started up here, they gave us those, x minus 2i, x plus 2i, and you can write this 2x minus 5. So, or you can just write x minus maybe x plus, right? Let's rewrite it. Instead of 5 halves, let's write it as, well, you can write x plus 5 halves. But we usually write that as 2x plus 5. So I'm going to rewrite it one more time. X minus 2i, x plus 2i, and 2x plus 5. And let's label that as the factors. So I've labeled both my answers here. There's my zeros, and here's my factors. All right, I'll stop this video there.